So we are here today covering the trending story about Taylor Lorenz's write-up in the Washington Post, exposing the person behind the infamous Libs of TikTok Twitter account. So just to give some backstory for people who have not followed this, most of you probably have, if you're online left political junkies like us. Libs of TikTok is a conservative Twitter handle that sort of curates viral or semi-viral videos that she finds embarrassing to liberals, and she tweets them out. She has over 600 Twitter followers, so she's got over 600,000 followers, and so she has a very large following, and that content that she retweets out gets picked up by a lot of, right-wing media people on Fox News and talk radio and things like that. And so Taylor Lorenz, columnist for the Washington Post, put out a write-up on this where she exposes the person behind this account, because the person behind this account has never wanted to come forward and be a public figure herself. So when she was interviewed by Tucker Carlson, she appeared on the phone, not using her real name. There's no image of her or anything like that. Taylor Lorenz thought it was newsworthy to expose this person. And so she wrote an article, which we're going to read through right now. First of all, the first reason that I hate this article is because this article broke me. It was behind a paywall at the Washington Post, and there was no way to read it unless I signed up for the free trial. So I signed up for the free trial for the Washington Post in order to read this article.
Oh,
here's my promise to the audience. I will be canceling that free trial before they charge me. That is my promise to our viewers and our listeners. Don't worry, I will not be giving the Washington Post any money whatsoever. So, Russell, did I set that up sufficiently? You've been following this a little bit more closely than I have.
Yeah, that's the long and short of it. I mean, as we go through this, we'll discuss some of the issues. I mean, one thing, especially being the vicious bastard that I am, I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up writing an article about Taylor Lorenz overall and why she should not be allowed to write for a fucking penny saver, much less a prominent newspaper. I want to be fair. You can make an argument that somebody who has a Twitter that prominent and that influential is a de facto public figure. You can make that argument. But Taylor Lorenz is the last person with a right to make that argument, given that she was just weeping about her online harassment 2 weeks ago on Meet the Press. Even if you can make that argument, she's not the one to make it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is almost fair enough. I think this would be a newsworthy story if the person behind Libs of TikTok were an especially odious person, like if they had a criminal record for inciting violence against minorities or something like that. If this was like, a truly extreme person, who really pushed the bounds of what is legally acceptable in terms of public discourse, I think that might be a news story. Mm-hmm. The news story here is that the person behind Libs of TikTok is a conservative. That's the only news story, as you'll see when we.
The angle that some of them are taking on it, on Libs of TikTok, is that, and I haven't looked at it enough. I started it wasn't on my radar. I started looking at it when this broke, so I haven't seen enough of it to render a judgment one way or the other. The argument that people who are supportive of what Lorenz did here are saying is that Libs of TikTok basically has an agenda against LGBTQ rights and links people who support those rights to pedophilia. Now, in what I looked at, which admittedly is limited, she does like to share like the craziest people she can find on TikTok, which, like you say, fair enough, media matters. And I did not see anything where she tried to claim that somebody is a pedophile. And I'm sure she didn't, because she'd be getting sued right now. she posts articles where people who are school teachers get arrested for pedophilia, and she will say things like, why does this keep happening? And so, yeah, is she drawing a connection without directly saying it? Sure. Yeah. I didn't see anything where she directly said that about a person's video, and I think she probably doesn't. But is she putting these two things side by side? The person arguing that they want to do gender studies with kindergartners and the teacher who got arrested for pedophilia, and are those things meant to be linked in the mind of the reader? Sure.
All right, let's get started, shall we?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Meet the woman behind Libs of TikTok secretly fueling the rights outrage machine by Taylor Lorenz. Right off the bat, meet the woman behind Libs of TikTok? No. It's meet the menstruating person behind Libs of TikTok.
Right there, she lost me.
I mean, do we even have to continue?
Yeah. Did she even ask how she identifies before she made that claim?
I'm sure she didn't even bother asking her if she identifies as a woman. And if she doesn't know how old she is, she doesn't even know if she's hit menopause yet. She might not even be a menstruating person anymore. So maybe we shouldn't have made that assumption.
Birthing person, you could say, maybe.
Birthing person, yeah. A once birthing person, a once menstruating person.
One-time birthing person.
Yeah, right. All right. On March 8th, a Twitter account called Libs of TikTok posted a video of a woman teaching sex education to children in Kentucky, calling the woman in the video a predator. The next evening, the same clip was featured on Laura Ingram's Fox News program, prompting the host to ask, when did our public schools, any schools, become what are essentially grooming centers for gender identity radicals? Libs of TikTok reposts a steady stream of TikTok videos and social media posts, primarily from LGBTQ plus people, often including incendiary framing designed to generate outrage. Videos shared from the account quickly find their way to the most influential names in right-wing media. The account has emerged as a powerful force on the internet, shaping right-wing media, impacting anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, and influencing millions by posting viral videos aimed at inciting outrage among the right. The anonymous account's impact is deep and far-reaching. Its content is amplified by high-profile media figures, politicians, and right-wing influencers. Its tweets reach millions, with influence spreading far beyond its more than 648,000 Twitter followers. Libs of TikTok has become an agenda setter in right-wing online discourse, and the content it surfaces shows a direct correlation with the recent push in legislation and rhetoric directly targeting the LGBTQ plus community. Quote, Libs of TikTok is basically acting as a wire service for the broader right-wing media ecosystem, said Ari Drennan, LGBTQ program director for Media Matters, the progressive media watchdog group. It's been shaping public policy in a real way and affecting teachers' ability to feel safe in their classrooms. Now, I just want to pause right here for a second. She is posting videos that already exist.
Right.
So if a teacher does not feel safe in their classroom...
She's not doing hidden cameras in classrooms.
Exactly. And we'll come back to that in a second because she makes a very unfortunate comparison later. And I'm not even talking about Taylor Lorenz. I'm talking about the owner of Libs of TikTok. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. The account has been promoted by podcast host Joe Rogan, and it's been featured in the New York Post, the Federalist.
That's it. That settles it.
Right, exactly, yeah. The Post Millennial, and a slew of other right-wing news sites. Meghan McCain has retweeted it. The online influencer Glenn Greenwald, that's my favorite.
Is that what he is now?
The online influencer Glenn Greenwald has amplified it to his 1.8 million Twitter followers while calling himself the account's godfather.
I must have missed that video where he's selling tanning butter from the prow of a yacht.
Yeah. I mean, this is the guy who broke what is certainly top 5 most important news stories of the last 25 years, which is the Edward Snowden leaks.
Sure.
And even his work in Brazil, exposing the wrongful imprisonment of Lula da Silva, who's probably going to be president again now that he's free. That's an extremely significant story as well. We don't hear about it much because we're in the U.S. and we don't tend to give a shit about other countries. But globally speaking, that's a hugely important story as well. So this guy, I mean, to call him an online influencer, I mean, is just really, really pathetic. Last Thursday, the woman behind the account appeared anonymously on Tucker Carlson's show to complain about being temporarily suspended for violating Twitter's community guidelines. Fox News often creates news packages around the content that Libs of TikTok has surfaced. Quote, "The role I've seen this account playing is finding new characters for right-wing propaganda," said Jillian Brandsetter, a media strategist for the ACLU. "It's relying on the endless stream of content from TikTok and the internet to cast any individual trans person as a new villain in their story." Throughout its increasingly popular posts and despite numerous media appearances, the account has remained anonymous, but the identity of the operator of Libs of TikTok is traceable through a complex online history and reveals someone who has been plugged into right-wing discourse for 2 years and is now helping to drive it.
You see, that just makes me feel bad. I feel like, what's wrong with us? We've been at this for 2 years. We're not driving anything.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You should take a page from her book.
Yeah,
An account in search of a voice and a big break from Joe Rogan. Chaya Rychik, so this is the woman's name, had been working as a real estate salesperson in Brooklyn when, in early November 2020, she created the account that would eventually become Libs of TikTok. Under her first handle, she minimized COVID, cast doubt on the election results, and promoted a dubious story about a child sex trafficking ring. On November 23rd, 2020, Rychik changed handles, this time going by Shia Ray and identifying herself publicly as a real estate investor in Brooklyn. She began doubling down...
Oh, is she here? She's in New York?
Yeah, she's a New Yorker.
Okay, so, this shows my own bias. As soon as this story broke, my brain just put her in Florida.
No, she's a New Yorker.
No? Okay, so maybe I can do a sit-down with her.
Maybe she's on eHarmony. You should look her up.
I should.
Yeah. She began doubling down on election fraud conspiracies using QAnon-related language. Early that December, she joked about launching a clothing line titled, quote, "Voter Fraud is Real." In January 2021, Rychik started talking about traveling to D.C. to support Trump on January 6th at the Stop the Steal rally. When violence broke out at the Capitol that day, she tweeted a play-by-play account claiming to be on the ground. Quote, "They were rubber bullets from law enforcement. One hit right next to me," she said. She posted videos from the crowd and spoke of tear gas being deployed nearby. After saying she left the riot, she used Twitter to downplay the event, claiming it was peaceful compared to a Black Lives Matter protest. All right, let me just stop right here. So far, what we know about the Libs of TikTok creator is that she minimized COVID, she was suspicious about the results of the 2020 presidential race, and she feels that January 6th was not as bad as a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests. Sounds to me like this person might be a Republican. That's what it sounds like to me. Like, the fact that any of this is newsworthy, like what so far is the news value of this piece?
Well, maybe if liberals did better in actual elections, they wouldn't fixate on things like this. They do because it's their version of trying to gerrymander districts. They don't have the political power to gerrymander districts, so just the way the Republicans are trying to unfairly rig the system by gerrymandering, because they have the power to do this, they're trying to gerrymander public opinion by framing things in a certain way through the media.
Right. Yeah, well said. All right, let's go back to the piece here. Later that month, Rychik cycled through 2 more Twitter names, this time focusing on state politicians. First under the handle Chaya Rychik and the display name Chaya Rychik, and then under the new handle Cuomo Must Go. She railed against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, calling for him to resign. She promoted the efforts to recall California Governor Gavin Newsom. She also began posting about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, calling him actually brilliant. Okay, the plot thickens. She doesn't like Andrew Cuomo, she doesn't like Gavin Newsom, and she likes Ron DeSantis. Sounds like even more of a Republican to me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's weird. It's like it's almost like not everyone is a Democrat.
yeah, it's almost like there are
Holy
people
cow.
online who don't agree with Taylor Lorenz.
Yeah, and we can't have that.
Yeah. I
She
mean,
she
this
went
is
she went to Swiss boarding school. She knows what she's talking about.
exactly. By early last March, she pivoted to a parody account titled Houseplant POTUS, pretending to tweet as if she was a houseplant living with President Biden. She revamped her avatar to look like a small shrub with Biden's face on the leaves. At that point in time, she also claimed to be proudly Orthodox Jewish, live in Brooklyn, and work in real estate in her Twitter bio. But the houseplant parody never took off. On April 19th, 2021, she pivoted her account once again, this time to Libs of TikTok. Just 4 months after getting started, Libs of TikTok got its big break. Joe Rogan started promoting the account to the millions of listeners of his podcast. He mentioned it several times on the show in August, then again in late September. Libs of TikTok is one of the greatest fucking accounts of all time, he said, with his seal of approval, Reichik's following skyrocketed. Libs of TikTok gained more prominence through the end of last year, cementing its spot in the right-wing media outrage cycle. Its attacks on the LGBTQ plus community also escalated. By January, Reichik's page was leaning hard into groomer discourse, calling for any teacher who comes out as gay to their students to be fired on the spot. Her anti-trans tweets went especially viral. She called on her followers to contact schools that were allowing boys in the girls' bathrooms and pushed the false conspiracy that schools were installing litter boxes in bathrooms for children who identify as cats. She also purported that adults who teach children about LGBTQ...
You think it's not possible. Wait.
Yeah, that's the next frontier. She also purported that adults who teach children about LGBTQ plus identities are abusive, that being gender nonconforming or an ally to the LGBTQ plus community is a mental illness, and referred to schools as government-run indoctrination camps for the LGBTQ plus community. Libs of TikTok is shaping our entire political conversation about the rights of LGBTQ people to participate in society, Drennan said. It feels like they're single-handedly taking us back to a decade in terms of the public discourse around LGBTQ rights. It's been like nothing we've ever really seen. By March, Libs of TikTok was directly impacting legislation. DeSantis' press secretary, Christina Pushaw, credited the account with, quote, opening her eyes and informing her views on the state's restrictive legislation that bans discussion of sexuality or gender identity in kindergarten through third grade, referred to by critics as the Don't Say Gay bill. She and Libs of TikTok have interacted with each other at least 138 times publicly, according to a report by Media Matters. When asked by the Post about her relationship with the account, Pushaw wrote, quote, I follow, like, and retweet Libs of TikTok. My interactions with that account are public, and added that she's a strong supporter of its mission. As the legislation progressed before eventually being signed into law on March 28th, Libs of TikTok ramped up attacks, flooding its feed with accusations of grooming. The right-wing media and influential conservative figureheads used anti-LGBTQ content from Libs of TikTok as a fuel for their arguments. Fox News host Jesse Waters and Tucker Carlson began featuring content straight from Libs of TikTok on air, with Carlson urging his viewers to follow it, quote, before it's banned if you want to know what may be happening in your child's school. All right, I want to stop right here. So there seems to be two reasons why Taylor Lorenz wrote this article. The first was to dox the owner of Libs of TikTok. That's fairly obvious. Originally, this Washington Post story actually linked to the real estate company that
right.
Chaya
Well, it
worked
showed her license, right?
Yes, and showed her real estate license, and they pulled that because they thought after the fact that that was over the line, that was going too far. But originally, yes, this was a full-on dox job. That's the first point. The second point of writing this article seems to be...
Which is remarkable for somebody who is just crying to Chuck Todd.
Yeah, exactly.
About online harassment.
No,
and especially doxing a woman. A woman. Oh, that's her whole thing, right? That was what she did the first time people really started going after her last year for lying about Mark Andreessen's activities on Clubhouse. she pulled the same card. Oh, women face horrible online harassment. It's literally destroyed my life. So you're going to out a woman? You're going to dox a woman like this?
Yeah. Well, that was clearly the first point of writing this. The second point of writing this, and this is why I've said over and over again that, you know, liberals are basically just as fascistic at the end of the day as their right-wing counterparts, is to complain, to sound the alarm that an ordinary person developed a following on social media and now is influencing discourse and legislation. Ron DeSantis's, her press secretary, was it? Ron DeSantis's press secretary is a fan of what she puts out online. And theoretically, I mean, she doesn't spell out exactly how that influenced the, you know, quote unquote, don't say gay bill. But her claim is that the popularity of her account is reaching enough people and generating support for lousy bills like the bill that passed in Florida. Mm-hmm. Whether you agree with that bill or not, whether you agree with what she has to say or not, and I certainly don't, isn't the whole premise of democracy that ordinary people ought to be able to influence discourse and, yes, even legislation?
Well, we never really liked that idea. That's why we have an electoral college.
Well, Taylor Lorenz certainly doesn't like that idea. The Washington Post certainly doesn't like that idea. Liberal media certainly doesn't like that idea. What's your point? An ordinary person became popular and is now influencing public discourse and legislation. Well, isn't that the way America's supposed to? I mean, what? How is that oh my God, how did this happen? That's the whole premise of the country. The entire premise of the country is that that's supposed to be possible. But apparently, that's only supposed to be possible if you have opinions that are within the boundaries of acceptability by Taylor Lorenz in the Washington Post.
For elites, if you look at and look, Robert Reich, I was very disappointed at the way that he reacted to Elon Musk's offer to take over Twitter. Look, it's a valid argument, and I think you made it, that we really don't want our freedom of speech to be reliant on the goodwill of billionaires. We really don't want it to be about which billionaire is controlling the platforms. Fair enough. That's not his critique. He's critiquing Musk's whole premise of restoring free speech to Twitter. I was very surprised that Reich took that tack. He's usually better than the others.
I mean, he went to an absurd length and said that, like, a free and uncontrolled internet aids dictatorship or something like that. I mean,
it didn't even make any sense. I mean, it's upside down land. Isn't it the dictators who want to shut down free speech?
Right. It's just completely idiotic.
It was really. So, but this is their basic premise. Even somebody like Reich, who usually gets it right on the economics and on the class issues, at the end of the day, they are elites, and they see themselves as the proper arbiter of public opinion, and the rest of you troglodytes are too fucking stupid to make your own decisions and to formulate your own opinions based on raw information and raw speech. It must be curated because the commoners are too dumb to decide what's good for them.
Yeah, and look, it sounds to me being Keaton, that this Chaya person behind this Libs of TikTok handle is a mean person with really horrible views. The difference between me and Taylor Lorenz is that I don't think it's newsworthy that, number one, such a person exists, and I don't think it's newsworthy that such a person is influencing public discourse. This is America. This is a democracy. Ordinary people, good and bad, are allowed to influence public discourse. In fact, they're supposed to be able to influence public discourse, and hopefully the smart people can defeat the stupid ones. Hopefully the good people can defeat the bad ones in the court of public opinion. But because the liberal elites have just become so out of touch with the experience and the needs of ordinary people, they can't win that debate anymore.
Right.
And they don't know how to win that debate because of what I just mentioned. And number two, they don't feel a need to win that debate because they take it for granted that they are inherently superior to people like Chaya, right? And so we don't have to win a debate. It's to them, it is obnoxious to even suggest that they ought to have to defeat her in a debate, that they ought to have to win an argument against these people.
Right.
That's what the liberals couldn't stand about Trump and Trump's supporters. Now all of a sudden they are forced to actually defeat the MAGA heads,
and they can't
in a public debate.
And they can't.
And they can't.
Democracy does not favor
we
them.
can. The populist left
the actual
can.
Leftists can.
The Bernie movement could have in 2016.
Cannot.
The Bernie movement in 2016 could have. I don't know if they could have in 2020. We never got to find out, unfortunately. But yeah, we could take them on. These liberals like Taylor Lorenz can't,
No,
and they don't know, and they don't know how to deal with that. And that's how you get dog shit articles like this.
Well, that's why they're always trying to shut it down, because they know that if you leave it to democracy favors their opponents. So they try to call the manager. It's all this call the manager to shut them down approach. This is why they go after Joe Rogan the way that they do. This is why they go after Tucker Carlson the way that they do. Because if you look anywhere that people are allowed to express their opinion through their choices, through their consumer habits, through their vote, this form of liberalism is crushed under the weight of reality. Rogan is the most popular podcast. Tucker Carlson not only is the most popular host in the 25 to 54 demographic, he's the most popular host with Democrats.
Right.
With Democrats. They try to introduce woke ideology into comic books, into movies, and they don't perform. They don't perform well. Superman now, since Superman went woke, it's for the first time in its history, it performs in the basement. It's under the top 50 comic books ever since they retooled it in that direction. So what can they do other than to say, all the people not buying Superman, they're anti-LGBTQ, they're white supremacists. What else can they do? What else can they do? They know they don't. Anywhere that people have the opportunity to vote in some way, either with their dollars or actually in the ballot box, they vote against them. So they try to rig the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. That's one phenomenon that's driving this. There is a second, and I do want to be fair here, because we saw some of this on the right during the Trump years, right, where our political system is just so broken and so impotent and so unable to actually solve problems, so that the party and the president in power is
solving
so
problems. Remember that? The purpose of government?
Right.
We're so far from that. It's like, oh, right. It's not supposed to be about these arcane culture wars that should really be left up to the individual conscience. The government is actually supposed to be solving problems for everybody of all identities.
In absence of that, because the party or the leader in power is just unable to actually govern, whoever supports the person in power, whoever supports the sitting president, has nothing else to do once they win power but dunk on the other side. So now that the Democrats are in power, the liberals have nothing to champion because Biden cannot do anything. He could do certain things by executive order that he won't because, once again, the system is just so corrupted. But so he can't actually govern. He can't actually lead. And so once you win and you're in power, there's nothing else to do.
To be fair, the only choices he's really up to these days is the strained applesauce or the pears.
Yeah, well, exactly. But that's a decision that doesn't affect anybody else.
Yeah.
He can't actually govern. So all you can do is dunk on the right-wingers. Now, the same was true under Trump. Once Trump won, he couldn't really do anything either. Even his signature promise, the wall, he didn't really deliver the wall. They built patches of wall along the border, but you didn't get the big, beautiful 1,200-mile-long wall that he promised. And so what did the MAGA chuds have to do when Trump was president except own the libs? That's all you can do. Now, when you're not supporting the sitting president, you can do something that is at least superficially, quote unquote, political. You can attack the sitting president, which the liberals did when Trump was in office, and which the conservatives are doing now that Biden's in office. But once you win the election, you can't actually do anything except rub it in the face of the losers, because your president, your party, can't actually govern, can't actually rally behind an agenda. So whatever power you have is really illusory, because the vehicle through which you would exercise that power has a busted engine. It doesn't run. It doesn't work. And so the only power that you have comes from the satisfaction that you gained from winning. And the only way to wield that power is emotionally, by rubbing it in the face of the people who lost the election. And so now that Joe Biden is president, Taylor Lorenz can't actually rally behind anything that he's doing, because he's not doing anything, because he can't do anything. And so all they can do is just try and pummel the other side. And the same thing happened on the right when Trump was president. This is not a uniquely liberal phenomenon. Mm-hmm. But it's just an indication of how broken the system is, that this is all that passes for actual, like, political discourse.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Right, exactly. Should we keep reading? Where are we here? Here we go. From the internet to the school boards. As the account has grown in prominence, Right Chick has taken steps to obscure her identity. Though she has done numerous high-profile media appearances, she's appeared anonymously. However, when registering the domain libsoftiktok.us last October, she used her full name and cell phone number linked to her real estate salesperson contact information. That must have been where the hyperlink was when they first published the article.
Right.
Now, I don't see how that's necessarily a story, because when you register a domain, you have to use a legal name, don't you? I mean, when I registered dudissidence.com, I couldn't put, whatever I wanted. I couldn't put a Twitter handle as the contact. I think you have to say your name and contact information.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah.
On Saturday, software developer Travis Brown, who's working on a project with support from Prototype Fund, an organization that backs open source projects, unearthed the account's Twitter history and posted a thread detailing information about its profile changes. When a reporter called the phone number registered to Right Chick's real estate profile in libsoftiktok.us, the woman who answered hung up after the reporter identified herself as calling from the Washington Post. A woman at the address listed Right Chick's name in Los Angeles declined to identify herself. On Monday night, a tweet from Glenn Greenwald confirmed the house that was visited belonged to Right Chick's family. Though Right Chick has claimed to run the account alone, last August, Grant Lally, a lawyer and Republican operative, fired a trademark for Libs of TikTok as a news reporter service. Lally said he is not at liberty to comment when reached by the Post. Now, this is the quote that is very unfortunate. I don't think Right Chick should have said this, because from what I understand, it's not even really accurate. Quote, "I don't do this for money or fame," Right Chick told the New York Post, which, like all other outlets interviewing her, allowed her to speak on the condition of anonymity, in February while comparing herself to Project Veritas. Now, what I thought as soon as I heard this story is that she's not Project Veritas. Project Veritas actually takes hidden cameras and actually does like sleuth work, and exposes people who don't want to appear publicly. That's not what she does. She finds videos that already exist on TikTok and tweets them out. So I don't know why she would make that comparison. To me, that really undermines her case, because if you are telling high school kids to sneak a camera into school and try and film their teacher saying something that the teacher doesn't want, posted online, then you have a little bit of a stronger case.
Well, sure. I mean, from what I've seen of her account, and this is the case from what I understand, all these people chose to put those videos on TikTok.
Right. The reason it's called Libs of TikTok
she's not generating content.
Right. She's just curating it. Right. I'm not some politician or blue check journalist. I feel like there are so many small stories that are so important that aren't getting out, and that's what I'm here for. In other anonymous interviews, she claims to have left New York for somewhere in California, recently turning the account into a full-time job. For a while, she was soliciting donations through Venmo. While Libs of TikTok briefly had a TikTok account of its own, it was suspended for violating community guidelines. Last week, the account was briefly suspended from Twitter for a second time for violating the platform's rules on targeted harassment. But Libs of TikTok continues to amass followers across the internet. It has more than 65,000 followers on Instagram, nearly 10,000 on YouTube, and a robust presence on right-wing YouTube competitor Rumble, along with other right-wing apps like Gab and Getter. It's also building out an email database through newsletter platform Review. Just first of all, Rumble is not a right-wing YouTube competitor. The reason right-wingers have flocked to Rumble is because they get censored on YouTube. The owner of Rumble is a Canadian liberal, not a right-winger at all. Yeah. Rychik has said in interviews that she crowdsources content for the feed from a flood of messages she receives every day. In that sense, Libs of TikTok is a collective molded to the hive mind of the right-wing internet. She views her account as giving a voice and platform to concerned parents and ordinary citizens. I see a shared spirit in Libs of TikTok and the appetite for it in right-wing media more broadly, which is turning neighbor against neighbor and turning any individual into an enforcer of this very strict gender regime. There's a deep sense of paranoia this rhetoric inspires and is extremely volatile. It's more than playing with fire. It inspires a vigilante spirit. Rychik boasts that several teachers have been fired as a result of being featured on the account. Tyler Wynn, a former English teacher in Oklahoma, posted a video telling LGBTQ kids shunned by their parents that Wynn was, quote, proud of them and loved them. It was featured on Libs of TikTok last week. Since being featured on the page, Wynn has been barraged with harassment and death threats. I've always seen myself as the type of teacher to stand up for marginalized voices, Wynn said. I see fellow teachers on TikTok speak out for our disenfranchised students, and they're getting the same sort of harassment too. The popularity of Libs of TikTok comes at a time when far-right communities across the internet have begun doxing school officials and calling for their execution. Now, that is a kind of that's a bit of a sleazy sentence there. The popularity of Libs of TikTok comes at a time when far-right communities across the internet have begun doxing school officials and calling for their execution. Comes at a time when is a phrase that you can use to sort of link two things that are not really
some people say.
I mean, we're doing this podcast at a time when somewhere someone is being beaten to death with a hammer.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's what they do. You know, you got a couple of nuts said something like that, or literally one, and right. This is what passes for journalism now.
Exactly.
They'll conflate it into a trend.
And like, once again, if she was taking hidden cameras in there to embarrass teachers and make them look bad, and then pumping that footage out on her channel to reach millions of people, totally different story. I would never defend that. Mm-hmm. The fact is, these are videos that were already out there. So right. Whatever, it's not like she's. I mean, she's not doxing anybody. You're not doxing someone for retweeting a video that's already on the internet.
Right.
Parents of LGBTQ plus youth have been driven out of their towns. Local school board members have reported death threats. On a recent podcast, Rychik said that as her following continues to grow, the fullest extent of her impact might not be realized until the elections this fall. She has encouraged her audience to overtake school boards and run in local elections. These people, she said, referring to members of the LGBTQ plus community, some of them are literally evil and grooming kids. They should not be in schools. They should not be teachers. Members of the LGBTQ plus community who still attempt to use platforms like TikTok to educate people on gay or trans issues are subject to intense online abuse, causing a chilling effect. Libs of TikTok is playing on fears and misunderstandings of who trans people are, while amping up extreme rhetoric and normalizing portraying queer people as inherently dangerous to children, Brandstetter said. It's hard to stoke moral panic without main characters, and the role Libs of TikTok is playing is finding those characters. Mm-hmm. So that's it. That's the article. I think we've basically said all we have to say about the article. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's in these kinds of articles, these kinds of attacks, they just never address the free speech issue. It's just kind of assumed in these articles. that we don't want free speech, that this speech is abhorrent, therefore it should be banned on the platform. I've gotten death threats online for before my politics took a hard turn to the left, I was very neoliberal. I have a viral parody song online that I got death threats for that. And it was very innocuous. It was like insulting Rush Limbaugh viewers.
Right.
It was nothing really radical about it. It was very MSNBC kind of comedy. And yeah, death threats. It happens, man. If you're going to go out, look at what we're doing. We're sitting here. We've been doing this podcast. We're going to continue to do it. People harass me. I knew what I was getting into. I knew that could happen. What do you, that's it. Like, you don't have to do this. Like, look, the guy, once in a while you get somebody like the Latino electrician who was accused of being a white supremacist for cracking his knuckles and got fired from his job. That guy wasn't asking for it. Like, that's just right. Okay, we're if you do this, if you're in the public sphere, if you're a journalist, you know the world we live in. It's not 1985. And if you gain any kind of prominence, some people are going to come after you. And it's not even things that necessarily matter. From what I've seen, the people who are in like the nerd space who do videos about what they think of Lord of the Rings, those people get harassed more than anyone speaking about politics.
Yeah, it's not surprising.
You should die. Legolas was the best character.
Yeah, I mean, I have not popped my death threat cherry yet, but I've read hundreds, if not thousands, of comments on our stuff that could plausibly be construed as harassment.
Sure. If we wanted to do that,
if we were
those kinds of jerks.
I just want to also, before we wrap, highlight something that the Libs of TikTok Twitter account actually tweeted out, because apparently in the run-up to this story being published, Taylor Lorenz reached out to a family member of Chaya Raichik. And this is what she said here. Here's a tweet on the screen. Hi, blank. She didn't out this person. I'm just following up here. You've been mentioned as the administrator of the Libs of TikTok account on Twitter, and I need to turn my story in today. Is that your account? Please let me know ASAP, because you're being implicated as starting a hate campaign against LGBTQ people. If you're unaffiliated with the account, I want to be sure to set the record straight in the story. If it is your account, I'd love to speak with you about it. I'm on blank, blank, blank if you want to give me a ring. Let me know and hope to hear from you. So she texts this person saying, hey, I have to turn in my story today. You're being implicated as starting a hate campaign against LGBTQ people.
Surprise!
If this is not true, you have to get back in touch with me and disprove this or dispute this in some way. How is that not like a coercive text? Like, we could get interviews that way. It's a threat, of course. Like, we could get like celebrities on the show that way. If we wanted to get like Timothy Chalamet on the show, we could message him somehow and say, Mr. Chalamet, there's rumors going around that you have a small dick. And we are doing a podcast about this tomorrow. If you would like to come on the show and address this rumor and make it known to everybody that you do not, in fact, have a small dick, we'd love to hear from you about this to discuss this and other matters. Otherwise, we'll be running with this story tomorrow. Hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye. Like, how is that a legitimate...
Loved you in Dune, by the way.
Yeah, P.S. Loved you in Dune. Exactly. We are going to implicate you as the leader or, a manager of a hate campaign. And so you have until the end of the day to get back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or else we're running with that.
Well, Taylor Lorenz is really the scum of the earth. Taylor Lorenz stalks teenagers for a living. She went after Kellyanne Conway's 15-year-old daughter, who apparently was making anti-Trump content, and started retweeting it and drawing focus to it, even after her father asked the media to stop and leave her alone because this was a child clearly going through an emotional crisis. And Lorenz's defense was that they're mutuals, like they're besties, you know. So she had a right to expose a 15-year-old girl to public scrutiny this way. She got caught twice lying about Mark Andreessen on Clubhouse, claiming he used the R slur, which turned out not to be true, and claiming that he was in a room with a white supremacist attacking her, which also turned out not to be true. So right there, and that's not disputed, that both of those facts were untrue. Why does she even have a job? Why does she even have a job? I thought journalists are held to some kind of standard, especially New York Times, Washington Post. The fact that they employ Taylor Lorenz tells you all you need to know about those outlets and their validity as news gathering organizations. If they were real news gathering organizations, they would never let her in the front door. The only way she'd get in the front door would be with a mop and a bucket if they were real news organizations.
Right, yeah. No, absolutely. And here's Taylor Lorenz showing up at the home of one of the relatives of the Libs of TikTok account. So Libs of TikTok tweeted, "Hi, Taylor Lorenz. Which of my relatives did you enjoy harassing the most at their homes yesterday?" It's not clear that this is the person who she sent the text to. It might be. But yeah, she goes to the house there to try and interview people.
Mm-hmm.
And look at what Alex Thompson, who I believe writes for Politico, yes. Alex Thompson tweets out, "Showing up at people's homes is standard journalism that more reporters should do. Like half of all the president's men is Woodstein showing up at people's homes." Woodstein being, of course, shorthand nerd lingo for Woodward and Bernstein. Woodward and Bernstein were investigating the president of the United States,
it's a little
but committed a crime. That's a little different from going to the relative of a Twitter personality who would rather not be made a public figure. Like, what kind of a fucking twit do you have to be not to understand the difference there? But this speaks to the main problem in liberal discourse, and this is what Glenn Greenwald talks about all the time, is that liberals see no difference between people in power and ordinary people. That's why their targets are increasingly powerless people who disagree with them.
Right.
And like I said earlier, the reason why they are the targets is because nothing political can actually happen anymore in this country. And so politics is all about owning your opponent.
Well, it's also because the news isn't the news anymore. It's clickbait. So they know their brain dead audience will get just as riled up and click just as hard, maybe harder, if you write a story about some 60-year-old woman who owns an ice cream stand in the middle of Vermont who is a racist. Just give it the right headline. Along with ice cream, a generous helping of racial hate. The libs will be all over it. So what incentive do they have? Look, it's hard and risky to investigate powerful people. Why not go after the person with the little ice cream store?
Right. Exactly.
You're going to get the same clicks, maybe more.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, I mean, final verdict on this, and this is what I tweeted out, like, I don't see the news value of this article at all. I don't see it being newsworthy at all that the owner of the Libs of TikTok Twitter handle is a conservative with views that liberals and leftists like myself don't agree with. How is that news?
It did take me by surprise. I mean, Libs of TikTok, I assumed that it was run by a liberal. Who knew that somebody who's right wing would have been behind a site like that? Shocker.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, and the fact that there's no news value there leads me to believe that, yes, her two main objectives in writing this were, one, to dox the person, embarrass them, and try to intimidate them in some way, and two, to sound the alarm to her elite peers that, look at this, an ordinary person got a social media following and is now influencing the political process. I don't see what's less democratic than that. I don't see how that can be the lament of someone who actually wants to live in a free and democratic society. I mean, they're just giving away the game. They're just saying we don't want ordinary people to have a say. I mean, that's the underline. If you read between the lines of this article, that's really what they're saying.
Sure.
Isn't it terrible that this person with bad ideas developed a following around those bad ideas, and now those bad ideas are influencing policy? Now, you might not like her ideas, you might not like the policies that are coming out of those ideas, but your job as a participant in a democratic society is to defeat those ideas in the court of public opinion, not complain to your elite circles that these ideas exist in the first place.
What's really sad in that article to me is the ACLU. The ACLU is really a shadow of what it used to be. They've really lost the plot. They've lost their purpose, their mission. And that's because I actually read an article about this. Look, the libs are their donors. So they cannot be the ACLU of old. There aren't enough people who will give them money who believe in the right of Nazis to march in Skokie. They don't have people who will donate money who believe that. But you got plenty of shit libs who will donate money as long as they keep providing pull quotes like that for articles like this.
Please clap.